Ready to go. I think we'll go ahead and get started on our December 4th work session, and I'll turn it over to the city manager.
All right, as Chris comes up, we've got three topics this morning. We start out with our neighborhood services block grant challenge. So Chris, go ahead.
Mayor Pro Tem, members of the City Council, Chris Johansson, Neighborhood Services Director. I'm here to talk today, just a review on our block challenge grants. And before we get started, we did want to talk a little bit just about Neighborhood Revitalization Toolkit. And this is, I know it's a lot of information that we have on the screen here for you, but this is just a good reminder that the block challenge grant is one of many tools that we do use throughout the city. I think kind of the main point with it is that we do try to match our neighborhood revitalization tools where they are most effective throughout the city. A lot of these tools that you do see, we do use throughout the city, but I know neighborhood revitalization is a key point for the city. And as we move forward, I do want to just keep in mind that this is just one of many tools that we do use. With that, I will turn it over to Heather.
Mayor Pro Tem, members of council, good morning. Heather Tamaga, Neighborhood Outreach Coordinator in the Neighborhood Services Department. And I'm here today to walk you through the 2023 Block Challenge Grant Program. Before I begin, I do want to recognize two key staff members who work hand in hand on this program with me. The first is Ryan Schweitzer. Ryan is kind of back there. There we go. Ryan is an assistant planner in the Federal Funds Division, and he reviewed this year 259 household applications. And he also assists with the information sessions. And then Kayleen Swearingen is our administrative assistant in federal funds, and she manages the reimbursement process. All right, so a quick program overview before we get started. This was the third year of the Block Challenge program. As you'll recall, this program started in 2021 when the city partnered with Invest DSM to mirror their Block Challenge program that they offered in their 4 special investment districts. In 2022 and 2023, the city staff administered the program, and Invest DSM has served as our fiscal agent. This program is funded through local option sales and service tax. And this program really is as easy as it sounds, which I love. To qualify for the program, the property must be located within the city of Des Moines. All the projects are for exterior home improvement projects, so that must be at least partially visible from the street. So think curb appeal when you think about this program. The applicant must be the homeowner on record or have permission from the homeowner on record to participate. And each property must be within eyesight of at least one other participating property. So you don't have to be able to see all the members on your team, but at least one member. I always say if you can stand outside your front door and wave hello, that person can participate on the team. And again, this is a team-based, neighborhood-based program. So the matching grant is based on the number of households participating. So our minimum number of households that participate is 5. Our maximum is 19. If you're on a household with 5 to 9 participants, each household can receive a matching grant of up to $1,000. So again, let's say 50% matching grant up to $1,000. And if you're on a team of 10 to 19 households participating, each household can receive a 50% matching grant up to $2,500. We do offer 75% matching grants for those who receive income-based assistance. So here is an overview again of the types of projects that we do see with the Block Challenge Grant Program. Again, these are exterior improvements that have to be at least partially visible from the street. But what I would like to point out with this list is not everybody has to participate at the maximum amount in order to get those maximum matches. So you can choose your level of participation. So for example, one neighbor might choose to put in a mailbox and house numbers, and maybe they spend $100. They can get that match of $50 back. But maybe their neighbor across the street is painting their house, and that's a $5,000 project. That neighbor can receive the maximum match amount of either that $1,000 or $2,500, depending on the team size. So again, this is a very quick hit program. The process is very simple. First of all, neighbors hear about the program, they gather and they form a team, and they submit a team application. Once that application is approved, which that application tells us who they are and where they live, what types of projects they want to do, we schedule an information session. That is where either Ryan or I go out to that neighborhood. We stand in someone's driveway in the front yard. The team comes together and we review the program detail by detail. So we review all the program guidelines, and then we take applications with us and we review that application process step by step. Each household then can submit their individual scope of work. So that tells us, again, who they are and what projects they would like to complete. They submit either a contractor estimate or a materials supply list, and then they send a before photo of the project. Once we receive the documentation from each household, then we review that team's information. Once a team is approved, they have 120 days to complete their projects. So again, we're trying to get in, make those quick hits over the summer months so they can get their projects done. Once they're completed with their projects, they submit to us either their paid invoice or receipts. So if they did the project themselves, they would submit the receipts back and an after photo. And then within 30 days, they receive their reimbursement back. Oh, and I forgot the big one at the end. I totally forgot. The best part of it is you have to have a block party at the end. So we encourage neighbors to come together, and they do have them, and we get invitations to attend. So that's pretty fun. Since last year, we did make some program enhancements that I'd like to point out today. The first of which is we did increase the project completion timeline to 120 days. In the past, it was 90 days to complete your projects. But specifically last year, we ran into a lot of contractor delays and supply chain issues that really impacted homeowners. So this year we allowed for 120 days, and that 30 days has made a really big difference. We've seen a lot fewer requests for project extensions, and almost everybody's turning their receipts in on time this year. In those information sessions, again, when we go out into the neighborhood and meet in the driveways or front yards, we've also added 2 other staff members who will attend with us. So John Herzog over in Permit and Development, he's a supervisor over there. He'll come out and talk to the participants about the permitting process. So what we had noticed is in the previous, people didn't understand the permitting process. I'm not an expert on the permitting process. So John said, why don't I just come out with you and talk everybody through that. And so what they've noticed on that end are more completed permit applications. In addition to that, Jacob Coupe, who's a planner, he works with the Historic Preservation Commission. He also now comes out with us when we go to the local historic districts. So for example, we were in Sherman Hill this year, and he comes out and talks about the certificate of appropriate application process. Because again, we found out that a lot of homeowners didn't realize that they had to go through that additional step. So we have felt, and again, I talked to him and he felt like he was getting more completed applications and just the process was more streamlined. We also did do some new marketing last year. So we redesigned the website with the help of the communications department, and we made sure that the information about the program is not in PDFs. It's actually all on the website so that if you're on there, you can use the translation option so that you can learn about the program easier. We also worked with the legal team to simplify a lot of the legal language that was on the contract, and so we made that more accessible. And I think the biggest thing that we did this last year is we offered the program materials in both English and Spanish. All right. So for the fun stuff, this last year we had a budget of $500,000 for this program. And if you'll recall, 2 years ago, 2021, Council had made the decision that 50% of the program budget would be reserved for low to moderate income neighborhoods. So out of that $500,000, we did reserve 50% for those low to moderate income neighborhoods. We had a total of 23 teams that participated this year, 13 of which were in those low to moderate income neighborhoods. And a total, this is our record-breaking year, of 259 households that participated. So we were very excited about that. And we had 14 neighborhoods that participated this year. And here in a moment, you'll see that that participation in the neighborhoods actually doubled from last year. We had total city funding of just over $501,000. And the total impact of this program this year with the city funding and then the household investment is $1.7 million. So again, this is a very small, quick, impactful program.
How many didn't get the funding, or did everyone get the funding that applied?
It's a great question. So all the low to moderate income neighborhoods were able to be served this year. So there was no wait list for them. There is a wait list of 5 teams. So they submitted the team application, but the funding was exhausted before they could get in. And those 5 teams are, 3 of them are in Beaverdale, 1 in Merle Hay, and 1 in Waveland Park.
And what's the total of that? You know?
I'll get back to you. I don't know what their total was that we were holding.
Thank you.
I'll make sure to follow up.
Reapply.
They will need to reapply for the next round. So comparing that with just the last 2 years of this program, I think one of the highlights of this, obviously, again, we doubled the number of neighborhoods that we were in. So this year we were in new neighborhoods, Fairmont Park, we were in Oak Park, Highland Park, we were in Chautauqua Park. Oh my goodness, now all of a sudden, because I'm standing here, I'm going to forget everywhere that we were.
I think you were in Fairmont Park.
We were in Fairmont, Southwestern Hills, and Watrous South. So let's see if I put this on the next slide. Ah, there we go. Okay. We got it. So just taking that previous chart and honing in on it for you, this is the headline. You know, in 3 years, this program has served 50 teams across the city, 24 of which are in low to moderate income neighborhoods. The city's funding is just about $1.1 million, but the total impact of this program in 3 years' time has been $4 million. And that's incredible. That's huge. I did map out, so the blue markers are the 2023 teams. So you can see again where we were in some of the new neighborhoods up in Oak Park, Highland Park. You have to look towards the top of the map because they were almost at Aurora Avenue up there. Fairmont Park and Accent. And then Lower Beaver was a new team. And then you can see just kind of how we came down through that western side and then down through Watrous South. So just because I like to compare everything, the 2022 teams are now up in orange. And then the 2021 teams are in green. So this is the compilation of where all the teams have been over the last 3 years. So program results by project. Again, the blue bar are 2023 projects, and then the orange line indicate the 2022 projects. Our 259 participants are completing 454 projects, again, in those 14 neighborhoods. You can see that landscaping, windows, doors, concrete work remain high. Tree care, we did a lot of tree care this year, but then you can also see that we had some dips. Apparently not as many people were painting in this year's program. Before I change this slide, do you have any questions? I just included some of the great projects that we saw throughout the city. So here's a landscaping project over in Waveland Park. New door down in Watrous South. I think this is a great program because it's one of the few where you get to see both the before and after of everything that has happened. Over in Chautauqua Park, this is a great story. So you'll see on the before photo on my left, you have the 2 homes. This was a shared driveway. So both homeowners participated in a program And what they got out of that is that shared driveway. And then the homeowner in the brick house on the right actually layered her participation in the Block Challenge Grant Program with a participation in ION. So that homeowner not only received a new shared driveway, she has a new door, the new front porch, you can see that new stoop is there, and some new windows. So this is a great example of how you can layer several of those revitalization tools. We really like driveways in this program, so. This is another great story. So down in the Grays Lake neighborhood, we had several of the neighbors come together. They had to put in new sidewalks. And so they came together and formed a team, and then the team members put in new sidewalks. Some painting over north of Grand. Nice new porch and pergola. Here we did some, I know that they refinished their front porch, and then they did some tree removal over to the right.
Heather, do you know how many people combined that then with the NFC's front porch?
I do.
Program?
So we have 17 that combined it with the front porch program,
Oh, good.
which is excellent. So, and that's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. When we go out and market the program, the NFC comes with us and we co-present and we talk about NFC's programs, specifically the front porch program. And I don't know all the details about exactly how that program works, or shouldn't probably speak on it as effectively, but you can actually participate in NFC's front porch program, have a portion of that loan forgivable, and then a portion of the rest of it is a match through the Block Challenge Grant Program. Fairmont Park, this was a great one. This was, again, a small team that came together, but they still needed to do some tree care after the derecho went through. And so what they did is they went out and found a contractor. They did tree care as a neighborhood, so they got some reduction in pricing because they used the same person. And then they all received the $662 as a match for that.
Heather, I know we can't share a list of good contractors, but I know Invest DSM, some of the neighborhoods have built their own list of contractors that will come out, bid, and complete the work. How are, in the citywide program, how are the homeowners getting to the names of contractors that are?
So I know that NFC does have a list on their website of contractors. And so oftentimes I will direct them over there, but I don't get in the middle of the contractor recommendation or those
Right.
lists. What usually happens is at the information sessions, neighbors, first of all, neighbors are meeting for the first time, we have discovered. But secondly, they're often then, when Ryan and I are leaving the sessions, they're still there and you can hear them sharing contractor information.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think some of the Invest DSM neighborhoods are willing to share their information.
I think they are as well.
Okay.
And we've noticed that some neighborhoods, for example, Beaverdale has a contractor fair. They bring in contractors. I'm starting to see an uptick, at least in interest in doing that for neighborhood associations where they're bringing contractors to the neighborhood.
That was an awesome event that they had this last spring at the, I think it was spring.
It was
Is that when
February.
we went to the, yeah?
Yeah, it was February.
Yeah, that was an incredible event at
Yeah.
the, was that at the senior center? Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it was packed.
It was packed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would be a good program if other neighborhoods or wards had a event like that. So
Exactly. So wearing my other hat with neighborhood associations, I actually wrote a piece up about that contractor fair and have sent it out to our neighborhood associations so that they could try to replicate that event. Yeah, it was great. Okay, so we had some more tree removal and siding. Different angles, but it really is the same retaining wall that happened over at Sherman Hill. We also like driveway and retaining walls. For some reason, our staff really like those. and some survey results. So we actually had a really high participation rate with the survey results this year. We had 31% of our participants responded. You can see here that this is just a highly rated, highly effective program. Again, a lot of feedback that we get is that we've made this very simple to get through. The application process is not complicated. The reimbursement process is not complicated. And really, homeowners have domain over how fast the projects go. What I feel was interesting is if you look and you can see that 54% of those that responded said they would not have completed their project if not for this funding. And the other 38% said that they may or may not have. So when you look back and you look at this year's impact of $1.7 million back into these neighborhoods, the percentage of that might not have even happened without this program. Again, it's very
I
impactful.
find it interesting that 63% found out about the program through other. What is that about?
So what really happens, I believe, so we also have another, go ahead. The 3%.
I'm
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah, neighbors. Okay, never mind.
What I will still say about the other is what we have found is oftentimes they see either the Invest DSM is usually the other, or our partnership with other community partners.
I got it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. I did put in a few of the responses that we did receive through the survey, but I would like to point out that third response. I enjoy getting together with neighbors I've never met, seeing the wonderful projects they are working on, and receiving assistance with paying for our own project. And that's really the essence of this entire program. On slide 2, I know we went by it pretty fast, is the mission of the program. And the mission starts out with neighbors uniting together. And so today we've talked a lot about the money and the financial impact in the neighborhood. But the one thing that you can't really talk about is the fact that neighbors are now getting to know each other. And that has made a difference. When I first started doing these information sessions last year, I just went out and assumed, like if we're on a team, I assume that we're neighbors and we all know each other. And it was my very first information session when I realized how quickly I was wrong about that. And you found that neighbors were living across the street from each other for years and had never talked to each other, maybe kind of did that courtesy wave, and then you just go home, you get in your house and you kind of stay inside. So it's very interesting to go from like having to do almost icebreakers as these information sessions begin. And from the beginning of a session to the end, where you can kind of see that they're now kind of warming up to each other very quickly. But then if you go back and you go to the block parties, it's a different vibe. Neighbors are now not kind of having that awkward first meeting. They've got to know each other through this program. And that's the one thing that is just not quantifiable through this. Looking ahead to 2024, we've actually started some soft promotional work, and you'll see me out and about talking about this program again. Some of the program changes we're going to make is we're going to refine the materials that the team captains need. So the key to this entire program is you have to find one champion in the neighborhood, and you have to really support that champion with all the information they need, because they're the ones going out, knocking on doors, talking to neighbors, and getting neighbors interested in the program. They're also filling out the team application, making sure that everybody else is filling out their applications, making sure everything's submitted, and then leading that block party. So we want to make sure that our team captains have all the tools that they need in order to engage with their neighbors, and then continuing to broaden our relationships, making sure that people are aware of the program, that they're referring neighbors to the program, and continuing to create program awareness in both wards 2 and 4.
Heather, is Invest DSM still cutting the reimbursement checks?
They are,
Okay.
yes, yes. It's a very effective relationship.
And how many times can you participate?
Right now, you can participate at one time, but we do review that annually. Because we still have so much program interest, I don't know that we're ready to say that you can participate multiple times.
Well, and when the let's see, when you began accepting applications sometime in early May,
May 1st.
how fast did that go?
So we opened applications May 1st at 9 a.m. And May 1st at 9 a.m., we already had more applications than we could manage. So that is those 5 on the wait list that I had mentioned previously. They all submitted May 1st at 9 a.m.
So
Yeah.
it looks like we need to review the program. No. On the financial, but anyway, is there any other questions? If not, thank you, Heather, and your team for what you've done, because really, truly, when you see the excitement by the neighbors, it is neighbors getting to know neighbors is the best reward out of this program, I think. Projects are nice, but I think when you see the excitement and them getting to know each other, that's even stronger.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Oh, Heather, just a quick question. Does anyone show up for your meetings that you have with the neighborhood associations? You've had different topics, bylaws. Attendance okay at those events?
Oh, at the leadership workshop sessions?
That's what.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Attendance was fantastic at the session. So we just had one. November was our last one. We talked about print communications, newsletters, postcards, making sure that we're all trying to do boundary-wide mailings. We had 4 neighborhoods that do it very well that came in and shared all their wisdom with everyone. And we had 55 participants at that session. So I think 55 volunteer leaders who are willing to come out on a Thursday night from 6 to 7:30 is fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now let's go to
Thank you, Heather. I really appreciate that we were able to use Heather to guide information out into the neighborhoods as we have new programming become available. Our next topic is on stormwater, and I probably should hearken us back to June of 2018 as to why this plan was put together. Obviously, that was a pretty devastating storm that we had on impacts across the entire community. And the council at that time was quick to act on the knowledge that we had available to us to rectify as many of the stormwater situations that occurred. But we also recognized there were new areas across the entire community that may have seen the first time impacts for stormwater. And because of that, we recognized the need to do a study that was all-inclusive across the entire community. And so with that, I will hand it over to Jonathan and Patrick.
Morning, Mayor Pro Tem and members of council. Jonathan Gano, Public Works Director. As City Manager noted, talking about the Stormwater Master Plan. The stormwater system is a lot of different parts and pieces, and there is a lot of it. That 568 miles of pipe, were you to lay that out, it would get you all the way to Columbus, Ohio, if you wanted to fly straight there. And many hundreds and thousands of other parts and pieces all put together to try to provide stormwater service to all 90 square miles. As noted, the driver for the creation of this event was notably June 30th of 2018, when a quarter of the town saw a very large deluge land right on it, and another quarter of town saw 10 inches land up immediately upstream from it. Lots of flooding, lots of damage, and not to be forgotten is that just a week prior, a similar intensity but smaller volume storm decorated the south side of Des Moines with another 2.5 inches of rain. So a lot of stormwater weaknesses found in a very short period of time, and notably away from, many blocks away from where we traditionally associate flooding alongside the rivers. These were 10, 20, 30 blocks away, in some cases at the very top of a watershed. The colloquial wisdom is that engineers usually buy houses at the top of the hill because water goes downhill. Some of those were some of our worst hit places, and some of our worst neighborhoods were at the top of some of the worst stormwater experiences in that event were at the top of the watershed. So part of the response to that was at the time was to dramatically accelerate some very long-term stormwater plans. Notably, the closest creek watershed was 15 years into a 56-year plan to upgrade its infrastructure to more modern standards, and we accelerated that dramatically. Still working on it. It's a lot of investment has gone in a very short period of time into the hardest hit neighborhoods from that experience, but that event and the city's response to it saw the creation of a Stormwater Infrastructure Advisory Committee, a panel of residents from all four corners of the city, and a key recommendation from those members of that committee was the creation of a holistic citywide stormwater master plan. We're pleased to present the end of that. I had come in earlier years and talked about phase one of that is a needs assessment, kind of figuring out what do we know and how much do we have and how well does it work. So we took a lot of information and put that into phase two, the actual development of the models that we're trying to figure out where our weaknesses are. Rather than waiting for the rain to fall and show us, we wanted to try to figure out based on what we know. So looking at all the different parts of phase one, basically information gathering, and this took place in a lot of different ways. But we started with defining all of our different parts and pieces, and the graphic on the front page had large scale categories, but even inside those, there's more differentiation still. This is a large and complex system, and we wanted to take a holistic look at all 90 square miles of it. That means taking a lot of different asset categories and breaking them down. And even then, we still don't, and did not then and still do not now know everything about everything. The system has been built year by year over the decades and since the 1800s in some cases. And the red on this map shows where we do not even know how old the pipes are. And age stands as a proxy for condition. And we've never formally modeled or completely hydraulically modeled the entire city. The gold maps, the gold watersheds there have been and are the subject of the most comprehensive stormwater plans. And partial modeling has been done on the blue ones, but you can see a lot of white space on that map there. But we were able to fold in our not just information that we have and the existing models that we had done on the watersheds, but also tracking work order history so we can incorporate where repairs have been needed over the last 10 years, tracked in our work order management system, and looking at our history of complaints over that similar time period, using that as an indicator that there's a problem exists at a specific place, and using that information to feed into our entire process. And then rather than waiting for complaints to come in, which are usually driven by rainfall, we also did a proactive survey, pushing survey requests out to residents using a postcard, in some cases targeted mailings to locations where we were not getting adequate response. A lot of volunteers to answer the survey in the northwest corner of town, where we saw the worst stormwater experience in 2018. But we did a lot of deliberate outreach to find and capture the survey responses from all neighborhoods, so that we had a fully considered approach to our plan. And then incorporated a lot of other forms of citizen engagement, whether going to neighborhood association meetings, outreach to the Des Moines NPO, and then the Stormwater Infrastructure Advisory Committee itself was a welcome piece of input, and kind of performed resident oversight on the process in a collaborative sort of fashion, so that we knew that as an operating department that our finished product would both meet our expectations and that of our residents. So I'm pleased to introduce the results of phase two, which will be presented by Patrick Bean, the Clean Water Program Administrator.
Mayor Pro Tem, council members, thanks for having us to talk about stormwater master planning. Jonathan did a great job of kind of talking about what got us to the beginning of it. Now, what are we going to start doing moving forward? That's what we're going to talk about here. So there were a lot of steps we went through in this phase two exercise, and we really started with, we need to understand what's the risk in our system. I know you've seen things like this before, but looking at risk from an engineering perspective, we're looking at what's the likelihood of an asset or a system to fail, and what's the consequence. The likelihood is it could be flooding, it could be a pipe collapse, it could be, just water quality issues, different things like that. Consequences, it can be, we're looking at damage to buildings, we're looking at flooding in the roadways, we're looking at emergency access issues, and then even business and property loss and value loss. So those two different things, when they're combined together, that's how we look at risk. So once again, combining those, what we're trying to do is what really floats to the top. What is the worst areas or the worst assets or the worst structures that we need to be dealing with? Because there's an overwhelming amount of work that could be done and probably should be done, but we really want to ferret out what floats to the top. And using a risk model like this, we're able to kind of take that likelihood and consequence, a lot of the data that we'd either had already, that we went through and reviewed in phase one, or data that we compiled as part of the phase one system, there's phase one reporting. And we're really looking at the red on the graphic here. If we do everything in the fives, we're probably doing great. But we also have some high risk stuff on the right side, and those are the ones that have a high consequence. Consequence, being the access under the loss to property values, but then also the likelihood. Those ones that really have a big, chance of happening every year. Every rain event, are we going to have flooding? Every rain event, are we going to have problems? And we actually took, when you're doing these, typically you look at like a 50-50 split on the likelihood and consequence. We actually went with a 65%, 35% split, because otherwise, every time we looked at it, what's the highest consequence we have in town? It's always going to be downtown. I mean, there's so much value, but there's a lot of other things go into that protecting. We've got the massive levee systems. We've got a lot of systems in place to check and make sure we're not having issues there, getting pumps set up and getting things taken care of quickly down there. That the rest of the town, it's a lot more area to cover and make sure we're managing. So we really want to make sure we were looking at the city overall and really trying to screen out some of those that are always going to rise to the top just because of the value that's there. So once we got into this, I know this is kind of a large graphic, but looking at the overall likelihood, so this is looking at that pipe condition, looking at customer complaints, and looking at capacity. So that's kind of what we're seeing here. You're seeing a lot of red, you're seeing some yellow, and you're seeing some green. So there you can kind of, looking at a map like this, you can kind of tell a little bit also when some neighborhoods were probably built too. Because some of this, if we didn't have full condition data, a lot of this was being driven by age data. Looking at overall consequence, like I said before, if you're just looking at where's the highest consequence, looking at drainage area, emergency access, land use, transportation, utility impacts, and water quality, it's really around downtown, mostly driven by land use and valuation on how much impact is there. The rest of this, there's a lot of yellow, but there is some other red and orange throughout the city. Yeah.
Two slides, just
Yep.
so I understand. Okay, so factors included, I'm looking at Brook Run, I see like 3 red lines,
Mm-hmm.
which is 4 to 5, and then the rest is green. Does that just mean those are newer pipes? Is that what I'm looking at?
It's primarily a newer system. I'm guessing based off of the desktop analysis we did for capacity, there's a few lines that were identified as probably being under capacity.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that I was understanding.
Yep, that's pretty sure that's what we're seeing there. Any other questions? So overall risk, this is where it all comes together, and then we're seeing red throughout the city. So once again, there's a lot of areas. If you're looking at that 5x5 graphic, where are the highest risk ones? Well, that upper right-hand corner, all those, the 5s and 5s in both likelihood and consequence is where you're really going to see that. What we're seeing here overall, there's a lot of red that should be addressed, but then how do we go through and identify that and then prioritize it? We took kind of a watershed approach with this because you have to be able to break up into smaller pieces. I mean, the city is a big area, like Jonathan said, over 90 square miles. So there's actually 71 sub-catchments or sub-watersheds within the city of Des Moines. And so that's kind of the approach we took on how do we kind of break it down into smaller pieces. As part of the overall assessment, we actually looked at a couple of them, the Bell Avenue 7, Central Place 13 just north of downtown, and a little bit of Merle Hay on a little deeper dive as part of the overall study. But once we took all the information we had, kind of laid it out and prioritized it on kind of scaled it out at a watershed level, we're able to identify what are the highest risk watersheds we had. And that's going to be used a little bit later as part of our continued condition assessment process. Looking at citywide, those high-risk lines, those equal to 5, we have about 24 miles of that. And it doesn't sound like very much, but that's a lot. I mean, typically with one of the big projects, the closest creek one, we might be dealing with a half mile to 3/4 of a mile of pipe that we're replacing with that. So 24 miles is many projects. And it's not, that 24 miles is not just this entire run. It's a pipe here and a pipe here at that high level, but then the 4s and 5s, we have 164 miles. So between those two, approaching 200 miles of pipe out of that almost 600 that we need to do something with in the near future. But just looking at citywide, I don't want to say everything's doom and gloom, but as we're looking at this, this actually is kind of related to the likelihood performance. So performance being capacity, and then condition being kind of whether the age or we've gone through and done a full condition assessment. This would be the worst of the worst. This would be that 5-5 when we're looking at that 5 or that 25 grid chart. Those are the ones we really need to be looking at. About 3% of the $3.4 billion worth of the system that we have that sort of a risk scoring to it. The next one being where we have the condition, kind of that age or the condition at a 5, but the performance. So maybe it's not as serious on the capacity. Another 2% there. So we're up to about 5%. But then when we throw in performance being 5, so the capacity is a problem, but the condition, so it's not super old or we don't have it shown that it's at the point that it's going to potentially collapse sometime in the near future. We've got a lot of breaks and fractures in it. That's a little bit less. That's another 16. So a lot of our high-risk assets are really associated with capacity. So I know we've come in the past and talked with sewer repair work where we're coming in and lining, doing a lot of that in-pipe rehab work or repair work that we're doing without digging up the streets. The challenge we have is a lot of our pipes being under capacity. That's not typically an option. We have to come dig it up and replace it.
Just a question. If a lot of this is under capacity, are we, at least in our planning now, making sure that new pipe that's put in is sized appropriately?
Absolutely, yes.
And at what point in time did we catch that we were undersizing our storm sewer requirements and make that change?
I mean, we've been following the traditional standards for quite a while. I mean, at least 20 to 40 years, I would guess, we're doing standard. But it's standard based off the time now. All of this is based off of, the rainfall intensity models that are out there to say how much rain falls in a specific amount of time, and that's typically what you size your pipes on.
Right.
And that's changed over time.
Right. I guess the question is how much of that standard was inadequately protective that we're now going back, and obviously with climate change, the predictions have changed even more. How much of what we're seeing here reflects climate data and expected extreme weather events, or are we still using data that was consistent with that?
Well, the current standard is still it's hard to look forward. Most of our modeling is based on looking back. We are starting to get more up to speed on those more frequent, more intense storms. And that is one of the things we're evaluating when we're designing now. But you're right. Probably in the last 10 to 20 years, that's really become an approach to look at that a little more closely. And so some of the stuff that has done in the 80s and 90s might not be quite at the right capacity to handle some of those more intense, more frequent storms.
So what you're saying is that the 16% that we see on this graph is maybe understating the magnitude of the problem if we're expecting more high-intensity events as climate change happens.
I think it could. I think regardless what's past this 21% that we're looking at here, this is still the worst of the worst. So when we're going in and addressing what really needs to be handled first, this is what we're doing. You are correct. Do we need to make sure we're looking at future capacities and what we need to be having for pipe sizing and making sure that we're not having to come back in a few years and address it again? We're doing our best with that, but It's still kind of it's still tied with, the engineering standards and the way we're doing it. So we're following, SUDAS and the Iowa Stormwater Management Manual for the way that's being designed and sized. And to go above and beyond that, I think it'd be a challenge for sure.
Councilman, if I could, real quick, we can get back with you on this, but in my conversations with the engineers, is that most of it, if not even close to 90% of the issues are with pipe that existed decades ago. And so we'll get you that information, but very little of this that I've heard in my conversations are an indication of the last 10 years were done incorrectly in any fashion. There's just 100-year-old pipes that are needing attention.
Can we get, without like a lot of details, just that 16%? Like how much of it is aged 10 years, 25 years, 50 years?
So, Mayor Pro Tem, sorry, excuse me. I remember I had coach basketball day yesterday, so I'm losing my voice. Mayor Pro Tem, yeah, I know. It was a rough game at the end there. Mayor Pro Tem, members of City Council, Steve Neighbor, City Engineer, also resident of Des Moines. As Patrick talked about, in the past 20 years, some of the changes that have been made is not only focusing on just the conveyance of pipe and stormwater detention, but also looking at for those major events on where the overflows will go. So when you talk about like Brook Run, for example, if you notice the newer subdivisions, it's not so much just about the storm pipes, but also designing that overland flow path when a major event does happen. Unfortunately, in our city, that wasn't the standard pre-20 years ago. And so in our more established neighborhoods, there isn't that overland flow path. So that's the challenge of these areas like, the closest creek watershed. And so that's the big difference now is the new standards have, it's not just, we don't size a pipe for say a 100-year storm. We size the pipe for like the typical 10-year storm and then design the overland flow path. And so this report looks at like not only the condition of pipes and where failures could happen, but also considers those type of things. So that I don't know if that helps a little bit with kind of the question of like thinking about increased rainfall intensities and and how does that get accommodated. It's thinking about not just about the pipe, but then like where does the water go when the pipe gets overwhelmed and the major event happens.
Right. Well, and in places, 31st Street, just behind the DMU campus is a good example where we didn't have the overland flow. We've now created it, but that involved removing 3 houses over time, right? So.
And we had to do that also, as Councilman got on the south side as well, right. That, when those storm pipes got overwhelmed at Southeast 7th and Trowbridge, yep. That was where the overland flow path, in theory, wanted to be. It's just, neighborhoods that were built in the 50s didn't. Yeah.
So you said like over the last 20 years, we've implemented that with newer neighborhoods. Is that what I heard you say?
That's the standard. Yep. And I would say that's been the practice for the past 20 years or so.
Okay.
Yeah. So
thank you.
And there's greater ability to accommodate the overland flow than the pipe.
With the new development, we have that. Yeah, because they're building in a cornfield, so that's what we even on the plans for new subdivisions, they're required to mark off that overland flow path. So you'll see them have like a detention basin. And then they have an overland flow path spillway where they actually mark this is where, even if the detention basin gets overwhelmed, this is where the water should go. So, yeah.
Thank you, Steve. So kind of looking at the high risk, where do we take it from there? Well, now we need to start to talk about where we're going to be doing projects, and we'll get into capital planning. Here, we took all of that high risk data that we had and identified what are the worst of the worst pipes and started developing where do we have one pipe, where do we have several pipes in an area, and we came up with 15 priority project areas. And so the blue little areas you can see here are priority project areas throughout the city. And here's a list of those, the top 15. And a couple things in this. One, there's a lot of money associated with these. There's over $125 million identified in these 15 priority projects. And this really just scratches the surface on the amount of work that needs to be done to continue to improve our storm sewer system. The other thing in here, as part of this program, we developed a prioritization scoring. So being able to take a look at the different projects and say which is the higher priority project, and thus be able to rank the ones that we have here. This is the first 15. We're going to continue to identify new projects, run that through the prioritization, and then include them in this list and continue to tackle those as the priority continues to go down on those. 2018, almost $30 million on Closest Creek, approximately not quite $20 million on Hamilton Drain, and then probably another $5 million on just repair and replacement and buyout projects, so well over $50 million. So there's been a lot of money that's been spent in the last 5 years.
Right. So that's good that we note that on top of the other 126 million that we're looking at.
126 million, but y'all, it's also in the context and the overall replacement of the entire stormwater system is about almost $3.5 billion.
Right.
So 125 million sounds like a lot, but overall it's a small chunk of what we're actually going to be addressing in the decades to come.
And we've made accommodations like down on Trowbridge and Southeast 7th, like Steve noted, that we've helped that neighborhood by purchasing some of the homes and creating that, so they're not flooding anymore. So,
and that's some of the challenges we have, especially in the fully built out older neighborhoods. The flow path that we have in there in the past, just the development standards, they built every space that was open.
Right.
That makes it so the water's still going to go somewhere when we get bigger storm events. And so sometimes the best option, the most cost-effective option for the city is just to buy out some of those properties along that flow path and clear it. One, it removes them from continuing to flood. And then two, it provides us an opportunity in the future to come back and do some work where we ended up doing those buyouts.
And we did that in other neighborhoods.
We have, absolutely.
So
yeah.
It's worked well.
Out in all the projects in Beaverdale, Drake, Prospect Park, you learn that taking those houses out isn't a mistake we made. It's a mistake that was made 60 years ago, and we're finally fixing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And even, not even just those, but along 4 Mile, there have been a lot of buyouts out there in areas it just wasn't cost effective to continue to try to protect them and save them from the flooding that's going to occur. The natural process is it's going to continue to flood. And so sometimes that's just the political and economic best decision that can be made.
And Patrick, when you talk about that amount, does that include, like in Brook Run, when we reconstructed Douglas Avenue going out, we put in additional storm basins?
Mm-hmm.
Was that included in that budget, or is that separate?
That's probably in that other $5 to $10 million of other work. Okay. That's not defined as a watershed type project. There's a lot of work that goes on. We always try, if there's an opportunity to marry up the roadway projects and some stormwater projects, we always try to take advantage of that, especially the roads ripped up and we need to upsize a pipe. We definitely want to do that then. The basins themselves were just an offshoot of what we were out there. We had some opportunities and some space to put some basins in to protect some of the neighborhoods there. So I don't want to go too deep into this, but my group actually deals with the prioritization. But just so you have a bit of an understanding of how do we go through and evaluate the different projects, we're looking at a couple things. We're looking at cost effectiveness. We're looking at what's the risk rating before we do the project and what's the risk rating we do after the project. And we consolidate that into kind of a risk reduction. Then we're also looking at 100-year building flood mitigation. So how many properties that were going to flood in the 100-year storm don't anymore. We're looking at the 10-year flood mitigation in the roadways, so how much flooding can we reduce in the roads. One thing I don't think most people realize, the roadway is part of our storm sewer system. The gutters there are meant to carry flow. Sometimes they get up a little higher than people are comfortable with, but that's still part of that system. Also looking at synergistic benefits, kind of like we talked about. Are there other projects going on? Are there, is this supporting development? Are there environmental benefits for doing some of these projects? And then there's one factor in there that's project impacts. So those others add up, but we have one that subtracts off, and that's project impacts. That's looking at, does this add some special O&M requirements and, special equipment, special training that we need to maintain and operate it? Does it have, inverse effects to the area? Maybe there's something that there was I'm trying to think of a good example of it. There was some natural feature there that in order to do it, it's usually trees. I mean, we had a nice treed area. We have to come in and put a new pipe. we're not probably going to go through the houses. We're probably going to run through the backyard. So we may be taking out a bunch of 100-year-old oak trees in order to get a storm sewer pipe in. And then, just different things like that. So this is the criteria that go in when we're evaluating the different projects and being able to prioritize future projects to get them in the list in the future. Now we're just going to take a look at the top 4 projects that kind of floated to the top in the stormwater master planning process. The first one at University and Polk Boulevard. This is right by Waveland Cafe, sits right at the intersection there. This was one of the highest ones. Flows go from right to left on the map you're looking at there. We have some pipes that are significantly undersized and very old running between houses that are problematic. So like I said before, when we go through and identify those high-risk pipes, we can't just deal with those pipes. If we just deal with those, now we're just pushing the problem either downstream or upstream, capacity-wise or condition-wise. So we rope off an area, turn it into a small little watershed, and do some work there. The other thing when we were looking at these, we were always looking at, is there a stormwater control option? Is there a detention basin or some sort of water quality feature that we can include with these? Some of them we can do it, some of them we can't. Of the 4 we're going to talk about today, I think only one of them has that option available. As you can see here, this is still a very highly built out neighborhood. It's going to be a challenge to get the pipe back through there. It will probably require boring to get between the houses again, or potentially pipe bursting of replacing that pipe through there. So the option of putting, unless we're just going to buy out to put some basins in, for this small of a watershed, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So it's just really going to be a repair project for about $3 million. Priority project number 2, this is at Douglas Avenue and 50th. This is actually just to the upper right of here is Hoover High School for reference. Flows from the bottom of the map to the top of the map here. We have a couple areas that are just severely under capacity towards the bottom of the page there in red, but even the yellow, we've got capacity issues along the route as well. If you can see right where it says 50th there, where it narrows, there's a blue box within the boundary. That is actually an area that we're looking at doing stormwater control. It's an area that we've been approached by the property owners. It's some disconnected back properties. Penny Myers, I know, has come and talked about potentially developing in the past and couldn't do it, so they're just looking to the city to see if we had interest in buying it. And we're in the process of buying that out already. Well, so we'll be ready to do that when we move forward with the project. This is a big project, though. It's about $19 million. I think it's the second biggest project on the list. So this is somewhat equivalent to potentially, the Hamilton Drain, some of the projects that size of a project. Ultimately, we'll have to break this up into multiple phases for, constructability purposes and, make sure we're getting competitive bidding as well. The third one is actually at Dean Avenue and 30th. This is Fairground, just west of the Fairground, southwest corner of the Fairgrounds there. I know we have capacity issues there every single time. It always seems to rain during the fair, no doubt. We seem to get some flooding there and down on Dean Avenue. And so this is actually going to be addressing a lot of the capacity issues on 30th here, about $6.2 million, because this is primarily done in the road right-of-way. There's not a lot of option for stormwater control. You can always look at it, underground storage, but that's so expensive and the cost effectiveness just isn't great. We're much better off with, open detention for something like that.
So doesn't that water come up from the 7th Ward ditch? Isn't that connected?
It all kind of, 7th Ward ditch is actually the kind of green and yellow line just to the right of the project we're looking at here. That's the 7th Ward ditch. That's the underground box that's been upgraded over the past 10 or 15 years.
So as we look at this project, Scott, we had a streetscape project for East 30th. So as we redo, obviously, it sounds like we're going to redo that street, East 30th. So we would engage in the fairgrounds and see if we can work on that type of streetscape when we do that, since we do have a plan for that.
We can understand that we would need to keep the budget separate, and we'd have to come up with that funding for the streetscape as well.
Well, it did
But
have
we can.
it did have a TIF in there that never got used, that got into the general fund, and so I know the TIF has ran out, but there was TIF there at one point in time that, as you well know,
Right.
So yeah, we would take a look at that. But as we do this project, I would like to have that considered as part of that.
I think having discussion with the state fair too.
Right.
They've expressed maybe more interest because of the flooding that's gone on in the buildings that they
Yep.
on the fairgrounds.
So we need to re-engage them do we have a timeline for at least this project?
Well, this is the third, so it's beyond the 5-year window. Beyond that, we don't really have a clear time frame.
So this is beyond the 5-year?
Yeah.
Okay.
I will add, on 30th, just east of here, there is another project that I know there's been some flooding on Dean.
Dean Avenue, yes.
Right by Feed Energy right there. I know we've had some issues. There's another smaller project that's actually going to increase capacity to deal with that. But just because of the impacts and the way the prioritization went, this came up higher than it.
Okay.
And then the final one, this is a capacity project just west of the Des Moines River, south of University Avenue. It's upsizing, a pipe down there that we've had some problems with flooding in the past. This is one of the smaller projects, a little over $3 million, but just because of the consequences of the impacts of flooding there, that's how this one ended up rising to the top. So that's kind of looking at the data we had and using that to develop projects moving forward. We also, like we said, we're basing a lot of this off of the historical age of the pipes, which is what we use if we don't have full condition information. And so, like we talked about before, that prioritized watershed list is how we're going to take and start approaching more in-depth condition assessments. And that's when we have, the TV trucks out there sending the camera down through the pipe, identifying the cracks, the breaks, the fractures, separations, problems, in corrugated metal pipe, it's usually that bottom that gets eaten out and is gone by the time we come take a look at it. But that's going to help us better define what other projects do we need to be doing outside of those areas that we looked at pretty closely as part of the study. And so the high risk or the very high risk watersheds are where we're going to be starting that effort. Sorry?
The inspections are completed. So the other ones were classified just by age.
Yeah.
Those 3 are red because you've actually done the inspections and it demonstrates that high risk based on sending those cameras down there.
They were red before we did the inspections. They rose to the top. And honestly, we picked smaller ones as part of a study. If I would have picked Beaverdale, we could have done 10 or 20% of the inspections. That's why we picked Bell Avenue right around, the Des Moines Waterworks administrative offices there, and then Central Place, up on that 13 watershed right along the Des Moines River. They were small enough we could go in and do a full assessment, so we kind of apply the process we were developing.
Right.
Merle Hay, we didn't do all of it. We did a portion of it, so we'll be going in looking those a little more in depth on the condition as well.
Got it.
So tying that in with the current budget we have, last year, a couple things. We appreciated City Council and City Manager developing a new line item in the capital budget for the Stormwater Master Plan program. That's applied some dedicated funding towards these types of projects. $2 million a year had been approved with that, and that's actually in this current year, so we're getting ready to fire up some of that. 2 efforts we're really going to be doing that. The priority projects we talked about, kind of starting to work down through that list. The first one being that University and Polk Avenue. We'll go in and do a full survey of everything like we typically do and do an initial 10% study to verify that is really the issue we need to be addressing there, and then working on down through those projects. In addition, we're about $500,000 of that $2 million we're going to be applying towards condition assessments. And so we've had an external contractor the last couple years have been assisting with that on the sanitary side inspections. We're going to have that same contractor start doing additional storm sewer inspections. And then that will get us a lot of good information that we can better define, where do we need to be doing more work, but then also what type of work do we need to be doing. What we're looking at here is not a full 5 year, it's a 4 years. It kind of just was the years we had the budget approved last year. You can kind of see down on Priority Project 3, the red, that's about where we run out of the $8 million. And so since the Douglas and 50th Street project was almost a $20 million project, we didn't have enough money to fund that, so we're just showing that there. The other thing is, it's not going to probably be done as a $15 million project. It'll probably be broken up into 2 or 3 smaller projects and done over a couple years in phases.
Patrick, going back to your number 1 priority project, so aren't we about to work on the streets
On
there
University?
too?
Yep.
So, how does that impact what you're planning and what's already in the queue for improvements on on University, are you going to have to tear up street to what already is going to be improved in the next fiscal year?
In this specific instance, I know Steve and I were talking about that and kind of getting prepped for this. We were waiting to kind of get this to council, and then we'll sit down and do kind of that complete sharing of everything between the roadway projects and the stormwater projects have been identified. I think due to the timing of the university project, if there did happen to be a pipe that needed to be put up there, there's still an opportunity to get that in as part of the project and not have to tear the road up immediately after it was done.
So at least a portion of the pipe that goes underneath
Yes,
University Avenue
absolutely.
will be addressed.
Yes.
That would be kind of bad
Yep.
PR if.
And there's a couple other locations along University. We did get some of the ARPA funding that we were on University east of here at 39th or 30, yeah, I think 39th, where we had another storm sewer crossing. It was one of the future phases of Closes Creek that with the university project coming through, we knew we had some serious capacity issues there, and we're taking and addressing that piece running underneath the road. So we are trying to be as proactive as we can, identifying that work that needs to be done before, especially these major roadway reconstructions are completed. So that work is being considered.
To Carl's point, I think tonight we set a date, a hearing for that project for February 4th, if I recall it right.
Yeah, we ordered construction so that.
Like, is there reason to set the date of hearing even later to make sure that we can address this first
Well,
over January and beyond, and just pick a different date?
I don't think so, but
I would defer to engineering. We know that we need to have this type of solution included in the street project. So if we need more time, we'll bring that back to you. But I have every confidence we'll be able to figure that out within the same timeline.
and I know this project shows University, but the impacts on University with this one, it's not like this is a major crossing. We don't have a 60-inch pipe that needs to be 120 that we're addressing. We've got a little bit of pipe just along the south side of University and one crossing, which is shown as it has enough capacity and it's not old enough. So likely, my recommendation would be that would probably be a lining project if we needed to do anything there, and it's not an upsizing and a capacity issue.
And then as the road gets torn up, if we identify it as more serious, then we'll make those adjustments immediately.
Yeah, I mean, that's what change orders, if we find something that we need to do with later. We don't like to use them, but if it's there as a tool when we find those things that we need to address during construction. Okay, thank you, Carl. So next steps. Well, we're kind of here today, kind of talking through, the council on kind of what we've been doing and what we're planning on doing moving forward. We're also in the process of, developing those budget prioritizations, based on any feedback you have today. And so this is actually going to get rolled into the overall budget planning. It's perfect timing as this next budget cycle. We're right at the beginning of everything and start talking about that with finance. And a lot of this gets down to, what can be afforded? What do the rates support for what we can actually get done? We do have some funding. Like we said, we're starting on that study, design, and construction of the first couple priority projects. And we'll also be taking on that project 3 and 4. We really want to get in that 10% study to really be able to better define it so that, we had high level numbers with this. We don't want to all of a sudden have a $19 million project turn into a $35 million project that we weren't aware of. Or maybe it's less. That happens sometimes. And then in addition, we're going to start that, that comprehensive condition inspections, based on the priority watersheds. That will then continue to feed back in. The nice thing with what we have here, this wasn't a report that we bought. This was a tool. This is something that we'll be able to update every year. When we go to budget season, we take what information we've gathered, we'll put that into the model. The model will then identify where do we have additional work that needs to be done. We'll take that and develop projects out of that. So this isn't, a lot of the times these just end up being a massive binder on a shelf somewhere, and all right, what's our next project? We'll pull it out and go. This one here, we can continue to revisit and update over the years.
Any other questions? If not,
Thank you, Patrick and Jonathan. But I do need to put a finer point to the last talking point here is that during budget season, we will need to look at this very carefully. There is the separate stormwater utility fee that is used for these types of projects. But you'll see on the one slide that we've slotted in $2 million a year as a starting point, and that was a while back. Now that we have this much information and an understanding of the magnitude of the challenges across the entire city, that $2 million a year is inadequate. That's what we know absolutely at this point. The question is, what can we afford? How much can we afford to increase that on an annual basis so that we can address the dozens upon dozens of projects that we've now identified is pretty important to get to work on. It's going to be a question of working with finance. We'll have that conversation with you in a couple months with this budget cycle. There will be probably year after year adjustments that will be necessary as we finish up the levee work that's also paid from that same source, and we finish up some of the separation projects. But what's clear to me now, and was not until the study was finished, is that we cannot wait for the levee work to be finished to start paying for these projects. We need to get these started, and the $2 million a year is just not going to get us there. So I will come back to you with what that annual amount needs to be adjusted to, at least for the next 4 or 5 years.
What does the stormwater fee on the water bill generate for us?
If you wouldn't mind, let me bring this all back to you, but that's a great starting point that we'll work off of.
I'd like to acknowledge, too, I know we have some committee members from the Stormwater Committee, and thank them for the work and really kind of not forcing the issue, but coming up with a need for a comprehensive plan. So thank you for your time and energy that you put into it, too.
I was going to say, Teresa and Carolyn are here with us.
Yeah, so.
Gloria Hoffman was planning to be here, but she wasn't feeling very well, so hopefully she can be here tonight, but we'll see.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So on to the next item.
Madam Mayor, I'm looking at the clock. For me, I have a funeral to go to at 9:30. This is a pretty important item. I'm not sure why it got grouped together with two other really, really important items. We're looking at 15, 20 minutes. I'm not sure if this can be covered in that, but I'll look to you, and I know we have a lot of folks that are here.
Well, yeah, I'm wondering if we could get a quick overview and maybe schedule it, or we could schedule it for a later time. So
Is there a natural break anywhere that we could get 15 or 20 minutes in?
Mayor Pro Tem, members of council, John Takip, Chief of the Fire Department. If you'd like, I could. No. If you'd like, I could give kind of the overview and some next steps, and then bring the rest back at whatever works for all of you.
Well, I just wondered if we can do this maybe next Monday at a workshop or something like that. I know there's nothing scheduled, but this is a pretty important item to our residents. And
maybe we could have an introduction and then schedule it again for like the 18th and have more time so that we get kind of an idea of what we're even looking at.
And are you meeting with your staff tomorrow? Is that what I read? And,
yeah.
And kind of going through some of the things? And
yeah.
Maybe it'd be good to get an update after you do that also.
Yeah.
Sure. And my opening comments really were going to not be about the content of this presentation, but some put it in context of the accreditation in general, because you have access to the community risk assessment and standards of cover document. That's two documents that are together.
Okay.
So today was going to be about learning how to use those, because a one-time at-large council member once asked, wouldn't it be great if we had a new way to look at things that was a living document that looked at where we're at and where we're going? And that is the nature of this. This will be different than any of the previous studies you've ever seen about the fire department that took a one-time look and said, do these things. This, like the conversation you had about stormwater, is an ongoing, every year and every 5-year review that you will see the fire department come back and seek action pretty shortly on going from registered agency to an applicant agency. That'll start a timeline for completing our community-driven strategic plan that the next 3 days, 42 members of the fire department will be working on. And so feedback from that will be helpful when we come back in front of you. But also completing our self-assessment. Now, for the documents that we'll talk to you about later, we use the Center for Public Safety Excellence to facilitate, because of it is the heavy lift. It is the foundation for all of this other work. And we'll have a conversation as to whether or not we need a similar resource for the strategic plan and the self-assessment. I actually don't think that we will. But what changes from today going forward this was getting the foundation built. It was a very in-series operation where now the things that we can work on really will be in parallel. So it's not like we need to wait to get to this presentation to work on this improvement or that improvement. We can do these things at the same time, and I think there's some synergy that will come from that. And without really going into all the math, I would recommend that, I know Scott sent a communication giving access to the document and just to get familiar with how the information is displayed, because how the information and particularly the data is displayed is one of the goals, so that going forward, not just the members of the fire department or the mayor and city council, but any resident with a computer can have access to our data and see in a dashboard format what's where, how long does it take to get someplace, all of those kinds of things that you will see in the standards of cover document. We just want any resident of, anybody in the world that has a computer to be able to see exactly what our data is. That is absolutely the most transparent we can be. And through these two documents, we have a measurable, repeatable, best practice means of doing that. A way of looking at where we're at and where we're going. Appreciate
It might be helpful, I think, to reschedule where we'll have time to look at this in greater detail, and everybody, that way we can help form questions, and then if we have questions before, you could ask, if that's okay with everyone else.
We don't have anything scheduled for next Monday. I just thought maybe we could
Right.
take a.
I mean, I'd be supportive of coming in next Monday to reschedule a coffee, but
I'm out of town, but that doesn't, I mean, that's.
Well, on
okay.
the 18th might be available too.
I just think this is an important item.
Right, I
that
think it's too
probably
important to go
needs to be on a workshop by itself.
Right.
The other
Okay.
two were very,
Well,
very
we'll work out
important.
the details on the date and so people have the information now, so you can start reviewing it.
You let us know, we'll
Okay.
do what you ask.
So with that, we will reschedule it, and I guess reconvene then tonight at 4:45 for the municipal housing, and then the 5 o'clock regular meeting. So I appreciate you coming. Sorry we didn't get to all of it, but we will, I think, be better informed by having a separate session.
While we're still at the table, you said you're going to be out of town, Connie, but could you dial in? Or?
Yeah, I could dial in.
Okay.
Well, no, I'm flying back, so maybe
Oh.
not. I just remember I'm flying
Fair
back.
enough,
But
fair enough.
we'll work that out. We'll work out the details.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So, it was so interesting meeting Fanny yesterday. What are the chances?
I was actually already texting